Good morning. It's the Celtic briefing on the 3rd of September. International break. Alison makes things slightly difficult on our end. There's nothing really new to talk about with Celtic. So I think what we're going to do today is, now that the transfer window is closed, we'll have a wee chat about how Ange Postecoglou might decide to set up his team now that the players he wanted to bring in are here and the ones that wanted to leave have left. So going through ahead of Ross County next week, Giakoumakis and Jota and Carter Vickers are in the door. It'll be interesting to see how long it takes each of them to get up to speed, because with a very demanding and intense style of football, sometimes it can take, especially Jota, who's not really played much first team football at all recently, some time to build up his fitness to be able to cope with demands. But when we get into October, maybe and November, I'm sure Postecoglou will have a firm idea of how he wants his team to line up personnel-wise. Do you think that we'll see any of the new boys in there?
I'm sure you will. I would expect to see the Greek international come in. I think with Edward away and Lee Griffiths away, I think there's a clear gap there for someone to come in immediately. I think what you do have now are options that perhaps just weren't there a few months ago. I think also the amount of players come in. I think there's been a dozen come in this window. I think it gives the manager his own squads to shape now. I think it'll always take maybe a couple of windows to properly get there, but I think he'll have players now at his disposal to implement the kind of culture and philosophy that we've already had a glimpse of now. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see just how the team shapes up. I still think there are the spine of the team essentially stays the same. But it'll just be interesting to see if there are tweaks to the current system, whether Kyogo retains now a place through the middle, or whether he shuffles things about, whether or not there is a plan B. I think with different personnel, is it an option to play differently and change things within games? But I think this will come to fruition when you see what happens and how things pan out over the next few weeks.
Is that probably the biggest talking point about where Kyogo Furuhashi plays? Because he's been so impressive through the middle. Against Rangers just last week, Postecoglou said at full time, I should have played him through the middle. But now with Edouard away, there's another rival for that berth in Giakoumakis, who is coming off the back of a great season over in the Netherlands.
Yeah, I think much will depend on how he comes in and what he has. Very clear physical attributes, I think, that lend Celtic an ability to play maybe a more direct way that we've not seen, and I don't think that'll ever be the protocol for this Celtic side, but it maybe just offers an opportunity to change things within a game. But I think the manager's admission after the defeat at Ibrox last Sunday, I think I would anticipate seeing Kyogo play through the middle. I think that would be the hint. I think Celtic looked better when he was there. I think the games that he has played, it's where he's been most effective. I would suggest that that's possibly where he'll remain for the time being.
Well, that, I suppose, then is Giakoumakis brought in as a different option for a plan B, rather than, or in case Postecoglou wants to change it up for a plan A, depending on playing away in Europe or against a specific team. But do you think in a strongest 11, it's Kyogo Furuhashi through the middle with Abada or Forrest on the right, and then we'll see how Jota fits in on the left, and it might be him there?
That would be my anticipation at the minute. I think when you're playing 50 or 60 games over the course of a domestic and European campaign, as well as a number of players who go off and represent their country on international duty, I think you need the depth to be able to change it. I think Celtic struggled hugely last season with James Forrest out. I think he's one of the most underrated players at the club in terms of what he brings in terms of assists and goals and big performances in big games. I think it highlighted a lack of depth last term in those areas. So I think it's important to have options. I think if there are injuries over the course of a season, suspensions over the course of a season, if there's a chance to rest people for certain games. And I think what the additions do is give you certain options in those areas.
The centre half position, I think, was quite an important one, and a lot of Twitter chat about the importance of bringing in another reinforcement, even if it's not someone that might start, but just another option. Because in pre-season, especially before Starfelt was brought in, it was Murray and Welsh who were doing fine, and then Baton was the utility guy. So now two have been brought in, and Julian to come back from injury. I wonder if Carter Vickers could work his way into the starting lineup when Julian comes back as well. You'll have him, Carter Vickers, Welsh and Starfelt. Is that a decent four?
Well, again, I think it comes back to giving the manager decisions to make. It gives him options. I think it creates a bit of competition that just wasn't there. I think that's particularly important. I think Near Beaton too is not a centre half. I think he's been deployed there basically on a needs must basis at times, but I don't think he is the ideal option to go in there. So I think what you want is players who are a proper fit for the position, who understand the position. I think Christopher Julian coming back will enhance Celtic hugely in that department. I think he's fairly vocal. I know he's not been without his critics at times, but I think he lends a solidity to the back line that's important. And I think the additions that you mentioned just give options and certainly give a level of competition. And I also think too, that there is a settled goalkeeper, who's a clear number one at the club, which I think too can be vital. And I think what you would be striving for now over the coming weeks is a very settled back line to enable partnerships to take hold and take root and to aim for a very consistent level of performance.
I suppose, though, Barkas, Ayeti and Bolingoli staying means that there's about 13 million in pretty much wasted transfer fees sitting. In some cases, probably not even on the bench, maybe in the stands. And I don't know what intel or knowledge you have on the sort of wages that these guys will be paying, because for those fees, they can command, them and their agents can command big fees on a weekly basis. It's probably frustrating for Celtic fans that sort of money has gone to waste and they haven't been able to be shipped on and then replaced with the funds coming in.
Of course, I think it comes back to what we've spoken about regularly. I think you need the infrastructure at the club there to a clear head of recruitment. I think you need to be identifying talent, doing your due diligence in terms of players coming in. But to be fair, what I would say is that every signing that any club makes is always a gamble, regardless of the fees that are paid. I think there's always an element of risk when players are coming in, but I do hear you, although there is a level of irony too. I think one of the criticisms last year was that the club hadn't actually spent money in going and sourcing players to come in. I think the money was spent. I just think the argument was that it maybe wasn't spent particularly well. And then when that happens, it can be very difficult to move players on, because when you're on a certain length of contract and with certain financial assurances, then you would be unwilling and unlikely to go elsewhere unless those terms were matched. So it becomes a bit of a problem. And I think that's when you see the need for a very reliable infrastructure that supports transfers in and transfers out, because it's a hugely key area of any club. And to be fair, over the course of the last decade, perhaps even longer, Celtic have a fairly successful track record of identifying players, bringing them in, developing them, and then obviously allowing them to move on for bigger fees. And I think you would want to look back at the success of that and look to replicate it and sustain it.
I wonder if Giacomakis fits in or doesn't fit into that mould. He's 26 years old already. He'll turn 27 this season, and he's had a really good, strong time with Vivi Venlo in the one season he had over there. Now he's come over and been given the number 7 shirt. Alison, is it overthinking to think that that's another responsibility on his shoulders, as well as just becoming a Celtic striker? Can there be a weight on a certain shirt number that is given to a Celtic player, given that the players that have worn 7 in the past, similar to Man United as well, it can be seen as quite a big deal?
I think there's enough distance between it. I think if you were the player who was inheriting it immediately on the back of a Henrik Larsson, I think it would possibly feel more pressurised. I think maybe now it doesn't carry quite the same weight because so much time has elapsed since then. I think anyone coming into Celtic, even though that you're unaware probably of the kudos of the number, I think will probably learn about it fairly quickly. I think the club has its own restaurant and suite named after it. I think it's very clearly probably the most iconic number within the club's history. But I think if you're a player, your focus really isn't on the number on your back, but the pitch in front of you and what you bring and what you do. I dare say if you're successful, it would be nice to buy into it. If the flip side of that is true and things aren't going so well, perhaps it's another niggle at the back of your head. But to be honest, I don't think it's massively significant at the minute.
Looking back at some of the more recent ones anyway, the whole PR7 thing didn't really work out when Roberts came back. Apart from him, it's been Chief G. Miku had it on his loan spell. Ljungberg had it on his short stint at the club. Robbie Keane, who was good for Celtic but didn't win any trophies, had it on his loan spell. And the last probably ultimately really successful one was Scott McDonald, which was probably 12 years ago now or so. So there needs to be a change in pattern anyway if the number 7 is going to be a positive one, a positive weight on the back of Giakoumakis. I think that'll wrap us up for today. Just a quick chat, Alison. And by the time we get back after international week, next week we can start looking ahead to Ross County and I think the Europa League, which starts fairly imminently after that.
I think it's the 16th, yeah.
Yeah, great. Cheers.
Thank you.